Thank you for joining us on behalf of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's delightful to welcome you back for another one of our CEO Leadership Series. It's a wonderful opportunity for the U.S. Chamber's Foundation and the Energy Institute to collaborate, to highlight issues that are so important to our country and leaders that are championing those issues. You know, our country was founded on the premise of free enterprise, and so there's no lack of CEOs to choose from to highlight and showcase at these events. So we actually do have some criteria to choose these CEOs. And we look for CEOs that really have experience and vision and a commitment to better not just their company, but their communities and ultimately the country in which they are operating or countries in which they are operating. And we look for CEOs that have a track record of tackling very hard challenges and are solution-driven. So just a couple of words before we get into introducing our next speaker about Doug. You know, he does have some experience. He met that criteria with 30 years of operating the oil and gas industry and in not such great areas, you know, Russia, the North Sea. Alaska was a nice reprieve, and then he got his ultimate reward of going to Trinidad and getting some warm weather there, so he probably thawed out there. And a vision. You know, this is the first time Encana has chosen an outsider to lead Encana. It was right after the company had split into two. And since taking the helm in 2013, you've really remade this company. We might call it Encana 3.0. And you can talk about that. And then you move the headquarters to Denver. On the community side of things, you know, they are so committed to developing the communities in which they operate. They have a wonderful program of Girls in Science. You sponsored just a number of marathons and runs, toy drives, food banks, sports teams. I'm sure we can talk about that in a little bit. All to benefit charities, their employees, and ultimately bettering the life of the people that they touch where they are making their investments. But I just have to close on one of your initiatives really stands out. And it shows your commitment to the community, but also tackling very hard challenges and being solution-driven. You know, when you work in the oil patch, you tend to get deployed to places that don't have a lot of infrastructure. They're very remote. They don't have a lot of services. And the oil industry has to provide for itself. And I have to say, Encana really places the safety and health of its employees at the top of the list. And they rely on a program called STARS Ambulance. And STARS Ambulance swoops in and rescues their employees and their families in a time of crisis or any sort of emergency. And so to support their mission and expand their facilities and to get them some additional funding, Doug participated in the STARS CEO Rescue in the Rockies fundraiser just in September. And I'm just going to quote from something he said during that and then share with you something he really said while he was up there in the Rockies in this mission. He said, quote, "Ensuring that everyone gets home in the same shape they left in the morning means a great deal to me personally. And I'm proud to support an organization with an equal level of commitment and passion for health and safety." So during the event, they took 4 business leaders up into the Rockies, including Doug, and they were flown up there by helicopter to a remote location in Alberta. They were equipped with a cell phone, and each CEO was then tasked to dial for survival. And they had to dial friends and family and raise $1 million before they could come down. They also had to build a shelter. They had to light fires to stay alive, and they met their threshold, and they met it within a day. I think you're probably very grateful that it didn't take too long. But he was also tweeting up there, so I guess they must have had cell towers up there. And I will share with you one of the tweets that shows another side of Doug Suttles. And this was his quote: "Best bear protection is a slow friend." So that shows he does have a sense of humor. Bring your running shoes when you're with Doug Suttles. A couple of logistics before I introduce Senator Cory Gardner. On your tables, you will see what we are going to be using as our hashtag. So we're going to do live tweeting. Please jump in. We'd like to get a real vibrant and viral conversation going. And on the flip side of this is your question card. Please write your questions out. And staff will be around to collect them so that when we have our Q&A, I can get input from the audience rather than making up questions, which will certainly not be as exciting. We are so delighted to have so many important people here today. We have the ambassador from Canada, Gary door, and a lot from the embassy staff. Thank you for being here. And I'm so delighted to welcome the newest senator from Colorado, Cory Gardner, who's just joined us to introduce Doug. You know, he's no stranger to this town. While he's in the Senate now and on the Senate Energy Committee, he was in the House before that representing Colorado, and really moved forward on a true all-of-the-above energy efforts in the House. I did the same thing in Colorado in the House of Representatives and became the majority whip, in the House in Colorado. A long and distinguished career, and a denizen of the private sector as well, in your family-owned business that you led. He's from Yuma, Colorado, fifth-generation Coloradan. And I have to say, Colorado is an energy state for sure, and you are bringing that mantle to Washington, and hopefully you can right-size a lot of the energy discussions here in our nation's capital. So please join me in welcoming Senator Cory Gardner.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here today. It's great to be at the CEO Series lunch in the Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for letting me be a part of this and to help introduce Doug. And Colorado really is the hub of an all-of-the-above energy policy. In fact, during our campaign, I'll never forget, we ran TV commercials about energy production, natural gas, and wind energy, to which Mitch McConnell was quick to point out when he replayed an ad with me and windmills, saying, "Well, you'll never see that in Kentucky." But it is great to be with Doug and to have the chance to introduce him. We were excited in Colorado in 2013 when Encana reaffirmed their commitment to have their headquarters, North American headquarters, U.S. headquarters in Denver, Colorado, just in 2013. A great opportunity to continue the thousands of jobs that have been developed by Encana and the great community resource that they have provided. I share a common bond with Doug, and that's that family commitment in a business. For multiple generations, Doug has been in the oil business. His family, following in his great-grandfather's footsteps, third-generation oil and gas industry, and as was mentioned, has lived all over the world in challenging places, and in Russia, and Trinidad, Tobago, Alaska, and I don't know if you spent time in California, but talk about challenging. The common bonds of the business, my family background, fifth generation to work in the same family business. Now, we sold tractors. You got into oil. I think that may have been a better line of business to get into. But in Colorado, $25 billion economic activity in the oil industry in Colorado, oil and gas industry. Over 200,000 jobs created in Colorado thanks to oil and gas. And what makes this family connection even more special, of course, in the 1930s, your great-grandfather, Doug's great-grandfather, worked in the Permian Basin when Doug was growing up, used to drive around through the Permian with your great-grandfather, and Encana has recently purchased a stake in the Permian Play, I believe, and so it's kind of a going-home opportunity. And, of course, Mr. Suttles enjoys all those great Colorado activities of biking and golfing and hiking and fishing and boating and all those things that make Colorado great and our country great, the activities that he participates in. And so in his comments today, Doug will be sharing how he has secured crude oil exports, saved IDCs from the chopping block, and convinced Henry Waxman to retire from Congress. So, Doug, congratulations. No, actually, those are my talking points. I'm sorry. That's what I was supposed to talk about. But please welcome a great Colorado and indeed a great company in the United States, Doug Suttles, CEO of Encana Corporation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Karen and Senator Gardner, for the kind introduction. I'm not sure I'm going to quite live up to that, though. But it's an honor to be here and speak at the U.S. Chamber event, particularly as I believe the Chamber does a tremendous job representing millions of American businesses right here in Washington. As a Texan who has had the opportunity to work all over the world, including Russia, the North Sea, South America, Asia, the Middle East, Africa, Canada, and the U.S. In fact, I've worn the body armor in Iraq as part of those duties. I believe I have a broad perspective on the global energy business and the importance of a strong and competitive North American industry. This is what I'm going to talk about today. Let me first do a brief introduction on Encana, the North American energy company I'm proud to lead. Encana was one of the catalysts for North America's energy renaissance. We pioneered the practice of unlocking natural gas from unconventional reservoirs, such as shale formations. We employ over 3,000 people in North America, are one of the largest employers in Denver, and have operations in 6 states. For each of the past 5 years, we've invested about $2.5 billion in the United States and contributed up to $1.9 billion in taxes, royalties, and supported thousands of jobs. In 2014, we invested over $12 billion in the United States, acquiring world-class assets in the Eagle Ford and Permian plays in Texas, making Encana one of the largest investors in U.S. oil and natural gas properties. We made these investments because we believe the U.S. energy business has a great future, built on a great resource base, great people, and a stable business environment. Encana's level of investment and the impact is emblematic of one of North America's most innovative businesses, which ought to be a source of great national pride. This hits at what I'm going to talk about today, specifically the American energy renaissance, what it means to our country, how to keep it going for the benefit of all Americans. As you know, the term renaissance means reborn and refers to a time of prosperity, a time of new thinking and technical innovation. The oil and gas industry's entrepreneurial spirit, technical innovation, and drive have propelled the United States towards an era of energy independence. This is truly a great American success story. But there are some challenges. Some are outside our control, like mediocre economic growth in some parts of the world. Some rest with the energy industry itself, for example, the need to better inform and engage with the public and to do a better job earning their trust. And some rest with the federal government and should be fixed quickly, and particularly obsolete laws dating back more than 40 years. Did you know you can't freely export crude oil from the United States, one of the world's largest producers of oil and other petroleum products? A country which prides itself on being a leader and a champion of free trade. This is an out-of-date ban on crude oil exports is costing American jobs, badly needed federal, state, and local revenues, and investment. To understand why America implemented this economic roadblock, it's helpful to reflect on an era that is now 4 decades behind us. It's 1975. Gerald Ford is president. I, perhaps like some of you in the room, was in high school. In fact, I was listening to Leonard Skinner on an 8-track tape player. You remember what those were. Yeah. The U.S. economy was recovering from OPEC oil embargoes. Oil prices, which had stayed in the $3 per barrel range during the 60s, had jumped to $12 a barrel. U.S. oil production, which peaked in 1970 at about 9.5 million barrels per day, had declined significantly, despite higher prices. This was the year Congress passed the Energy Policy and Conservation Act, prohibiting crude oil exports. The U.S., it seemed, was running out of oil and natural gas. But a lot has changed in the last 40 years. In fact, a lot has changed in just the last 10 years. American oil production has almost doubled, from a low of 5 million barrels a day in 2008, and now back to that peak we attained in 1970. In 2015, according to some sources, the U.S. will regain its status as the world's largest oil producer. So how did this renaissance begin? At a high level, it was a combination of made-in-America technical innovation, entrepreneurial spirit, and a clear demonstration that the free enterprise system works. There's a saying in our industry that oil and gas is found in the minds of men and women, and that was never more true than the shale revolution. As oil prices have increased, the industry had access to more capital to focus on unlocking the huge potential in these unconventional formations. It succeeded because it is one of the world's most dynamic industries, and there are several reasons for this. We have access to land resources. The U.S. is one of the few countries where government doesn't own and control the majority of mineral rights. Ordinary people do. We have a talented labor pool and access to world-class pipeline and rail systems, which connect to the largest refinery infrastructure in the world. We have an environment where competition thrives. When one company figures out how to deploy some of the most advanced technology in the world to safely extract oil and gas from these tight rocks, everyone else sets out to do it better, and they do. We have a system of government that works, at least most of the time, and we have an existing regulatory framework based on the best science that protects people and the environment and provides the certainty needed to attract investment. The other game changer was hydraulic fracturing, or commonly referred to as fracking. Despite popular opinion, fracking isn't new. Our industry has been doing it safely for decades in conventional reservoirs. We've long known there was huge benefit in extracting oil and gas from unconventional formations. The challenge was pioneering a way to extract oil and gas from rocks with less porosity than cement. It took the expertise and ingenuity and tenacity of many bright people, along with access to significant amounts of risk capital, to arrive at the solution. It involved combining two technologies, horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, to unlock what is now a massive new resource. The benefit from this technical advancement in the U.S. is an estimated 58 billion barrels of oil and 665 trillion cubic feet of previously inaccessible natural gas. With this newfound energy abundance, the U.S. is becoming the new swing producer for the world, capable of influencing global energy markets. America's energy renaissance means that we have a bright future. But where are we now? What does this mean for you, your families, your businesses, your customers who need reliable, affordable, and safe energy? I can confidently say that America's energy supply is reliable. The U.S. is now the world's largest oil and natural gas producer. This reliability and security is enhanced by our relationship with Canada. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, for every dollar the United States spends on buying goods from Canada, the U.S. gets 90 cents back in new exports sold to Canadians. Together, we enjoy a $140 billion a year energy trading relationship. North America is now self-sufficient on natural gas. The same LNG terminals we once thought would accept gas from the Middle East are now being reconfigured to export U.S. natural gas. I can confidently say that American energy is also affordable. We enjoy some of the lowest gasoline, natural gas, and electricity prices in the world. A 2014 study by the American Petroleum Institute found that U.S. school districts saved over $1 billion on energy during the 2012 to 2013 school year, enough money to employ 14,000 teachers. The average U.S. household is expected to spend about $550 less on gasoline in 2015 compared to last year, providing much needed support to strained family budgets. And the low energy prices that have resulted from this renaissance have helped create a resurgence in U.S. manufacturing. The growth of U.S. oil production has backed out imports and contributed to an oversupply on world markets. The Saudis, who have the lowest cost reserves in the world, have said they will continue to produce to protect their market share. And as a result, global oil prices have returned to where they were a decade ago. I can also confidently say that energy is produced safely and in an environmentally responsible fashion. U.S. producers operate in a highly regulated environment with standards that are amongst the highest in the world. The industry continuously works with regulators to reduce its environmental footprint. However, these efforts enjoy a far lower profile than concerns about our oil and gas operations. For example, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's recent greenhouse gas emissions inventory showed that the industry's methane emissions have decreased 11%, while emissions from hydraulically fractured natural gas wells have decreased by 79% since 2005. This self-directed continuous improvement highlights an industry that strives to do better. Increased natural gas production has encouraged greater use of natural gas for electric power. Consequently, CO2 emissions in the United States have dropped to near 20-year lows. We did this while growing the economy and reaching record levels of oil and gas production. There is also the positive impact of the oil and gas industry on the overall economy, something I don't think we talk enough about. The industry is a tremendous wealth creator. Since 2000, it has invested over $3 trillion in the U.S. economy to satisfy growing energy demand. Through its day-to-day production and operations, the industry pays on average about $3 million per hour in taxes, leasing, and production fees. The industry directly employs around 2.6 million people and supports 7.2 million jobs in industries across the country. Increasing production has lowered energy costs and added more than 500,000 high-paying blue and white-collar manufacturing jobs in the United States since 2012. For example, in Colorado, one of the nation's top 10 producing states, the average salary is about $50,000, while the average Colorado oil and gas worker's salary is around $100,000. The benefits of local production reach every American, whether or not they work in the oil and gas industry. For example, in Colorado, for every $1 our company invests in constructing a new well, we estimate that 65 cents goes directly back to the local economy through taxes that pay for schools, roads, and other critical public services. We pay royalties to local landowners, and we buy goods and services from local businesses. Hopefully, I'm conveying the positive impact of the oil and gas industry and the way all Americans benefit from this energy renaissance. But where do we go from here? America can retain its status as an energy superpower for years to come. Let me give you a glimpse at just two of our country's best plays, the Permian and the Eagle Ford. Together, they produce between 3.5 and 4 million barrels of oil per day. This is astounding given that 5 years ago, they collectively produced less than 1 million barrels per day, and each one has even more potential. For example, just 2 of the 12 formations in the Permian have an estimated total recoverable resource potential of 75 billion barrels of oil. That's enough to maintain U.S. oil production at a rate of over 9 million barrels per day for over 20 years. As I mentioned earlier, we have challenges to overcome to realize the full potential of our energy renaissance. Today's low oil and gas prices have taken a toll on producers, suppliers, tax revenues, and communities. In 2015, the industry is expected to trim capital investment by 35%, or $50 billion, and the current volatility is threatening high-paying jobs. Year over year, the U.S. rig count is now down over 1,000 rigs. Let me make that more real. Each rig represents around 100 jobs, so more than 100,000 American men and women have been impacted by the falling rig count. And a significant percentage of these jobs are some of, if not the very best, blue-collar jobs in North America today. In the same way that growth in the oil and gas industry helped create jobs in all sectors, the downturn is being felt widely across the country. Some of the first layoffs announced as domestic oil prices dropped were in the steel industry. In January, U.S. Steel Corporation said it would shut down 2 Ohio pipe plants and lay off 750 workers. Everaz North America, a Colorado steel producer, announced a layoff of 200 workers. We've seen these cycles before, and our industry will find its way through this cycle as well. But we need a level playing field. We need to receive the global price for our product, the same price foreign producers receive for theirs. To achieve this, we need to remove outdated laws from the 70s that don't reflect our new energy-abundant reality. Current rules only allow limited exports of crude oil, for example, to Canada or processed condensate. On the other hand, exports of refined products are allowed. This is costing American businesses and taxpayers billions of dollars, a situation that can be easily and quickly changed by the administration and Congress. Today, largely because of the export ban, a barrel of American crude oil sells for about $10 less than the global price. It's absurd to think that other countries can sell their crude oil into U.S. markets where U.S. crude is essentially locked out of global markets. At the recent CERA conference in Houston, Senator Lisa Murkowski, chairwoman of the U.S. Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, summed it up perfectly. We shouldn't lift sanctions on Iranian oil while we were keeping restrictions on American oil. It just doesn't make sense. Allowing U.S. producers to trade their crude freely on the global market would create significant value for the American economy, the American people, and would help stabilize a global supply. Let me explain. Lifting the crude export ban will reduce the price of gasoline for all Americans. The price at the pump is tied to the global price of crude because refined products are exported. Adding U.S. crude oil to the global oil market would help to increase global supply, putting downward pressure on global prices while simultaneously increasing the price the United States receives for its crude. Numerous independent economic studies, including one from the U.S. Government Accounting Office, agree that repealing the export ban will put downward pressure on gasoline prices. Global consultancy IFC International suggests this may save, on average, up to $5.8 billion per year between 2015 and 2035, meaning Americans pay less at the pump while state and federal tax revenues go up. Lifting the crude export ban could increase U.S. tax receipts, create jobs, and boost investment. If we close the $10 differential between the U.S. and the global price, about half would be collected through federal and state taxes and to royalty owners, helping finance schools, roads, and public services. It's anticipated that the industry would reinvest to increase production, creating more high-paying jobs across the country and ultimately generate more tax revenue. It's an economic win for every American. Economic consultancy firm IHS Energy believes ending the ban would add $751 billion of investment in the E&P sector, increase crude production, create an additional 394,000 jobs, add $86 billion to the annual GDP, and add $239 per year of disposable income to every American household. Lifting the crude export ban would help stabilize global supply. Increased oil production from the United States would stabilize global supply, providing some insulation against future volatile global prices caused by unpredictable production from other producing countries. It would enhance America's energy security, amplify the effectiveness of sanctions, boost U.S. geopolitical standing, and create opportunities to develop new energy trading relationships with our allies around the world. Lastly, the concept of lifting the ban on crude exports is widely recognized as sound policy by some of our country's leading thinkers. Economists, national security and foreign policy experts are in favor of it. Polls show that 2/3 of American voters support the sale of U.S. crude oil to our trading partners and believe it would create jobs, lower prices, shrink the trade deficit, and strengthen America's global strategic position. I agree with these experts. It's time to lift the ban on exporting American crude oil. So in summary, America's energy renaissance over the past decade symbolizes America at its best. Our free enterprise system has supported tremendous homegrown technical innovation and ingenuity. The result is a strong, responsible, innovative energy sector that turned America into an energy superpower. The benefits are enjoyed by virtually every American. A competitive and successful oil and gas industry is fundamental to the quality of life we all enjoy. Keeping U.S. oil flowing will keep world oil prices lower without artificially punishing American producers. However, we need to have the right policies in place so we can all benefit from the potential of our energy resources. In lifting outdated laws that prevent crude exports, we will create jobs and wealth all across our country in numerous industries, increase local, state, and federal tax and royalty revenues, and put money into the pockets of everyday Americans. Lifting the crude oil export ban is good for consumers, it's good for jobs, it's good for government, and it's good for greater investment right here in America. The reason I'm here today is because you can make a difference. The Chamber's efforts span many critical industries and highlight issues of great importance to this country. This is one of those issues. I urge you to talk to everyone you know about this important issue because it affects all of us. I urge all of you to play your part. Thank you.
Thank you. Compelling tour de force about issues that are so critical to our country. And I've actually, been to Calgary a number of times, been to your headquarters right down Calgary. There is big news coming out of Calgary overnight. So maybe you'd like to share with us your view on the headlines coming out overnight. Yeah,
it was fantastic. Some of you, I'm sure, were watching closely last night. The Calgary Flames actually beat the Anaheim Ducks in Game 3. That's what you were talking about, right? Okay, I just checked.
I heard there was an election, but I was watching the hockey game.
No, there was also a big election yesterday in Alberta as well, and a big government change. And I think people will be watching this quite carefully because I can tell you the province of Alberta and the city of Calgary are feeling the pain of low oil and gas prices. And there's rig count in the United States is down about 50%. In Canada, it's down about 75%. It's significant. It's affecting government budgets. It's affecting employment. You can't miss it. And I think with the new government, people will be very interested to see what the new policies are and how those will affect not just our industry, but the economy.
And truthfully, our spies that saw you last night out to dinner saw two split screens. One was watching the election, one was watching the game. So he did have his eyes on both of those. You opened your talk with saying, I'm a North American energy company. And that's truer for you than almost anybody else. 50% or thereabouts of your revenue comes from the United States and 50% from Canada. Strong allies, but different operating environments. Can you shed a little light on how different it is and also how similar it is to operate in Alberta and BC versus the Permian and other places that you're invested here, the difference between Canada and the U.S.?
Well, you know, they're not, I think, as big as maybe people would think. You know, first of all, in the places we operate, Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and then Alberta and British Columbia. These are all, in many, are natural resource states, and they understand that, and I think the people and the political leaders understand the importance to it. You know, both countries have high environmental expectations. Probably the biggest difference you'd really see between them is the remoteness of operations, which creates a new challenge in Canada. Many of our operations are away from large towns and cities and have to be supported by camp environments, the things you referred to in STARS. But you have an environment where I think people understand the benefits of our industry. They promote the industry. They support it. And the technologies we deploy in Canada and the U.S. are the same. In fact, one of the things we believe we can do with our portfolio is move technology across the border quite quickly. So if we learn something in British Columbia that will work in South Texas, we try to move those ideas around as fast as we can, because we do only focus on those two countries, and we only do unconventional plays. We only do these shale plays. That's all our company does. One
of the areas that you did mention was taxes. Clearly different tax environments in both countries. How does that affect your decision of where to put your next dollar, if it's north or south of the border?
Yeah, you know, having had the opportunity to work all over the world, I always remind people capital doesn't recognize borders. Capital flows to the place that's best remunerated. And see, particularly in an industry like ours, which is a global industry, what we have to have and what the policymakers have to understand is if they make it uncompetitive, what happens is the money will just go someplace else. It will just move. In Canada, we have some advantages. We pay typically lower royalties. We have some additional taxes we pay up there, but I think both Alberta and British Columbia are very aware they need to compete. The U.S. has been an energy market for Canada for a long time, and the U.S. is an energy producer, so they know they have to compete on the playing field. But certainty is the critical factor here, because our industry invests large amounts of money, and the payout comes over many, many years. The scariest part on policy changes is change. Because when we look out in time, if we don't have confidence that the tax environment we'll be in when we're making the money is the same as when we spent the money, it creates a big risk to the capital.
Sure. You mentioned the rig counts and how much they were down, 1,000 rigs down in the United States, more acute in Alberta. And everybody wants to know, we're talking about it at CERA Week, talking about it in the halls of Congress, when does the rubber hit the road? When do we see that amount of activity being taken off the market actually starting to affect the market?
Yeah, I always, if I could predict oil and gas prices, I wouldn't have to work. But I think that what we're starting to see, I think if you wind the tape back to late last year, at the very end of the year, early this year, I think most people thought you wouldn't see a production response until 2016. There are now predictions you're going to see it this month in May, and I think partly that's having some impact on the price today, because you pulled so much capital activity out more rapidly than I've ever seen it before. I've been doing this 32 years and been through, unfortunately, a number of downturns, and the only thing I've seen that's different this time so far is how fast the industry pulled capital back. And you know, for people who aren't in this industry, literally overnight, the price of our product dropped in half. And we were an industry that was spending about 140% of cash flow. So you had no choice. You didn't have a business choice but to pull spending back very rapidly, or you wouldn't actually make it to 2016. And that's what it's done, and it's done it incredibly quickly. And I think that the impact of that reduction in spending will show up quite quickly. And then I think the problem is some of the projects, because sometimes we focus just on North America, but some of the mega projects that underpin much of the global supply are now getting deferred. You won't feel that production impact today. You'll feel it at the end of the decade. And so this volatility in prices will discourage capital, which over the longer term probably makes prices higher, unfortunately.
Let's look under the hood a little bit of Encana. We've been making the argument for quite some time, and you said it in your remarks. You look at the pace of change in the industry, that if we were having this discussion 10 years ago, we'd be looking at importing 70% of our oil. We were looking to building more import terminals for our natural gas, and now we're looking to export that gas and export oil as well. So as you look at that and that pace of the change and technology development happening in Denver and in Houston, not Silicon Valley. Let's look under the hood of Encana and tell us a little bit about some of the technologies that are public, nothing proprietary, that you're most excited about for the industry right now, and particularly if there's anything that's unique to Encana.
Well, I think that what the industry is learning is these unconventional plays. So these are shale rocks, which are the rocks that sourced the oil originally, where it was cooked from the dinosaurs, as people like to envision it. We always knew they held hydrocarbons, but we never believed we knew how to get them out. Those more conventional reservoirs that we've been developing for the last 100 years, it's not uncommon to get 50 or 60% of the oil that's in the ground out commercially. In these unconventional reservoirs today, we average probably between 8 and 12%. So the old rule of thumb in our industry, where the best place to look for oils in an oil field, is no more true in this, because and the industry is moving quickly now. If we look at wells we drilled in 2010, and if we drill a new well beside that well, we're probably going to get between 50 and 100% more production from that new well than we did from a well we just drilled 5 years ago. That's largely coming from improvements in the hydraulic fracturing. We're continuing to learn how to do this better and better and better and recover more of the resource that's there. And that's why I think it's incredible to think that we've gone from 5 million barrels a day to 9 in such a short period of time. And by global standards,
think about what the price of oil would have been if we hadn't had that increase in production. We'd be sitting here, you wouldn't want to come to Washington.
Well, people, this has been written by others, but for example, with what happened in Libya and their production going from 1 million barrels a day to 0, those sort of events that happened in the middle of this North American shale revolution, people predicted that prices probably would have gone to over 150 a barrel if we had not had the growth in supply between the United States and Canada. And this is why it's got geopolitical importance, it's got economic importance. But having been in this industry a long time, I believe that we're just getting started. I think that, I don't know what the number will be, but I have a hard time believing we're going to walk away from this and leave 90% of it still in the ground. And by the way, the same things happened on natural gas. I mean, this has been incredible. There weren't, 10 years ago, we thought we were running out. Energy prices were growing because a lot of natural gas is used to generate electricity. And now today we have so much gas we're exporting it. We talk about 100-year supply. It's actually bigger than that, but talking about more than 100 years isn't even meaningful. And this is innovation. It could have happened elsewhere in the world, but it happened right here. And unique circumstances of having a free market, access to capital, access to land, a regulatory environment will allow you to move relatively quickly were critical, because these rocks exist elsewhere in the world, and today the production from them is insignificant. It's not even meaningful.
Just staying on sort of your company, you said that you're a North American energy company, but there's one country missing from that equation, right? You've got Mexico opening up and ripe in a time frame that we can see. Any plans to becoming the first real, true North American energy company? Well,
we're monitoring it closely. I mean, our industry has looked at Mexico for decades and said, boy, such potential if we could have access. And it was always just beyond our reach. And you have to give the government and the people there great credit, because what they've done in a short period of time, no one, I think, really believed would happen, and it has. Unfortunately, there are changes rolled out at the very time the prices dropped, which has probably slowed things down a bit. But clearly us and others are watching it very closely. And there's a long history, just as there is with Canada, of a great trading relationship. Many of you may not know, but a lot of U.S. natural gas is going to be exported to Mexico. This is a great new demand for both U.S. and Canadian gas. This is important. It'll help their economy. It'll help their manufacturing sector. It'll help the people there, because their electricity prices will go down. And it'll create jobs and tax revenues right here in the United States.
Absolutely. We talk about people losing their jobs in the industry because of the low price environment. Let's talk about the other side of that, about the jobs that you need, the vacancies you have, the type of skills you need, high paying jobs. Talk a little bit about the workforce. And do you have the labor you need? Do you have the skill sets you need? Or do you see that, often people say that the long-term outlook, we have the great crew change. 50% of energy professionals and skilled workers are eligible for retirement in the next 10 years. Are we prepared to take advantage from a workforce standpoint, this great energy revolution?
Well, we've talked about this for a while, but it's amazing how challenges are met in that technology advances. But our industry really requires two critical skill sets. What people refer to as STEM, so the science, technology, engineering, and math-based professionals, and a highly skilled blue-collar workforce. I think people don't realize how many blue-collar workers, people who operate our wells, who drill our wells, who build the plants our production goes through. And so the crew change argument seems to have always focused on just the engineering and science-based professionals, but in many cases in our industry, access to highly skilled blue-collar workforce is just as important. And technology is affecting that as well. It's going into the field quite rapidly. And what it means is we need to do even more to train these people so that they can have access to it. I think it'll be a challenge, but I think the industry will meet the challenge. We've also gone to what you might consider unconventional supplies. Our industry is a great employer of retired soldiers, both here in the United States and in Canada. And we found it's a great talent pool for our industry, and it's been great to see.
Focusing a lot of your remarks on oil exports, there's obviously still a lack of energy IQ amongst a lot of people. We grew up in a time of energy scarcity. I was, even odd days and filling up your tank. And listening to Leonard Skinner, I suspect you probably had bell bottoms on it as well while you were listening to your
I don't think I owned a walking suit, though.
But as you look at that, it does take this is not just something you can make a decision by the numbers. We've lived with this for 40 years, and understanding it as we're vulnerable, we're running out, and now we are sitting in an era of abundance. What do you think it is going to take to actually get that vote to change our policy?
Well, I think the approach the industry has taken, with some help from some great political leaders here in Washington and in the States, is to educate. Because a lot of people, I think they forgot that the export ban was even there, because until we reversed the decline in production, it actually didn't have an impact. We didn't have crude to export, so it wasn't an issue. So reminding them the law is there. Secondly, helping them understand, because it's not necessarily intuitive to say if we export our crude, gasoline prices go down. It's actually not a very complicated story, though. Because we export refined products, and those compete against other refined products that are refined from the global crude, or Brent pricing is how it's referred to, that sets the price of gasoline. And what we have is a refining infrastructure in the United States that was built to run heavy crudes from Venezuela, heavy crudes from Mexico, heavy crudes from Canada. And they've invested billions of dollars to be able to do that. They don't have the capacity to refine the production we produce today. And there's not any economic incentive for them to do that, because those other crudes are less expensive, and they would have to spend new money in their refineries to process this light crude. So you just need to let the market work. And when we walk those discussions through with policymakers, It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. They all understand it. They get it. In fact, maybe something we overlooked in the industry was the geopolitical implications of this, and they reminded us of that actually a new stable supplier on the world market actually makes the world a more stable place. It's a good thing to do. And then I think helping...
By the way, we call those democratic molecules, and I don't care whether you use a small d or a big D, as long as we get the democratic molecules out into the marketplace, right?
Yeah, and then the last thing is, I think, helping people understand what happens to that $10 difference between the global price and the domestic price. I think the walking in assumption is, well, you guys get it as oil and gas companies. And I said, actually, a lot of it's coming out of your pocket. We pay a lot of revenue taxes in our industry. So those taxes are off the price of the product. So it's directly impacting local, state, and federal tax revenues. We pay royalties. It varies where you are, but up to 25% of the production goes to the mineral owner, whether that's a government or an individual. That's up to $2.50 of that 10 is going to them. And then I only half-jokingly tell people our industry's got a spending problem, so what's left, we'll take it and we'll spend about $1.50 for every dollar we get if our track record's consistent. And of course, that generates jobs. And once again, these are some of the very best jobs in this country. Not only do they pay well, they have good benefits, and these are careers. In many cases, these are jobs which change families, generational.
And communities.
Yes.
I mean, rural communities in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas. I mean, these are things that were, dismal and dying, and now
Yes.
they're vibrant and growing.
Absolutely.
Let me just talk to you a little bit about natural gas. Here in the United States, it's $3. Europe, it's $8. Some places in Asia, it's $15. We're on the cusp of exporting some of our first natural gas. As you look at the market, I mean, the world market, we could talk about the difference between WTI and Brent, and there's, we understand that, but it's been a regional market. So as we look at becoming a gas superpower and an exporter, does that price differential go away? What happens?
Well, I think over time, it has a hard time going away because it costs a lot of money to move that gas around the world. Liquefying it takes a lot of capital investment, and in the liquefaction process, it takes about 10% of the energy to liquefy it. And then you got to put it on a ship and move it thousands of miles away. So I don't think it will have any real impact on the domestic price because the supply is so big. And it's all economically priced. I mean, the amount of gas our industry can generate at $4 per million BTUs is almost limitless. So what I think you can do here is create energy resources for countries that need them, and many of them want diverse supply. They don't want to buy just from one country and one source.
Like Russia.
Like Russia, and there are other parts of the world that are not as stable. So many of these countries, when you talk to them, buying natural gas from the United States or Canada is a great thing to do. The supply is almost limitless. It's not going to have a meaningful impact on prices here because of those transportation and other costs. It'll always be advantaged. By the way, it's the same thing is true for crude. The U.S. refiners will always be able to buy it cheaper than an international refiner because of the transportation cost to get it internationally. And this is I think sometimes we lose sight of how the economic benefits of reliable, low-cost energy. I mean, it touches everyone's lives, and they're so used to flipping the switch or going to the pump and not thinking about what happens upstream of there and all of the government and tax revenues, all of the jobs, the schools, the roads, all the things that benefit from production. And the question is, do those benefits go to people in South America or the Middle East, or do they go to the people who live right here?
No, and your price point is a very important one. As we see the first train starting to leave here, as soon as later on of this year, and prices won't go up, that should give politicians who have to make these decisions some confidence that their vote isn't going to then be turned around and met with a price, increase at the pump, or they won't be blamed for it, right?
Right.
Just one last question before we have to wrap up. And you're king for a day. You're either in the White House or you're sitting, in Canada. What is the one thing you'd like to see change about how we in North America are operating in an energy market? I mean, you look at what's happened here in the United States, and all of this on the oil side has happened on state and private lands. On gas, there's still some increase on federal lands, but not much. And things are very different like that in Canada. So if we look at this market that is only going to become more integrated, more important, more resource intensive as we become sort of the center of gravity of the market, in order to capitalize on that as a competitive and comparative advantage, what do we need to do to really, put that on steroids?
Well, I think the biggest opportunity for our industry is this whole education around energy. Because I think if people understood where their energy comes from better, their views on policy and what policymakers do would change. Our industry has loved being in the background for decades. The world doesn't allow anyone to be in the background anymore. We're right on the stage. And I think if we raise the education level, I think the policies and the decisions, the opportunities and the fears would be perceived completely differently. It's clearly very important to do that with our policymakers, but we've got to do it with the public at large. They need to understand that the environmental standards, for instance, and the safety standards in the United States are amongst the very highest in the world. If you're importing that product, there's more chance than not that it's coming from a place whose standards are considerably lower. And I think most people believe that the environment is not just local, it is a global issue. So all you're doing is pushing production activity to maybe places where the standards aren't near as high. You're pushing all the benefits of energy production to other parts of the world. Some of these parts of the world are not our friends. They're not our friends. They don't have our interest in mind. And I don't think people recognize that. When they put the gas in the tank, they don't realize where the gas came from and who benefits from the production of that product. All they do is interact with the consumption of it. And if we raise that level, I believe we would shift the debate. And we've got to be committed to that. That's not going to happen in a day, a week, or a month. It's going to go on for decades. And we need to start with policymakers, but we have to go to the public as well.
Well, I think Senator Gardner said it best when he gave you your marching orders, that you're going to solve the oil export problem. You're going to make sure that taxes aren't raised on the oil and gas community, and you're going to solve this energy IQ problem. So it looks like you've got lots of extra time
Absolutely.
To run your business. Please join me in thanking Doug Suttles. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I will ask one logistical detail. If you could exit the back of the room, because we now have a competing meeting going on in this room, and you will upset their apple cart and their lunch. So if you wouldn't mind going out the back. Thank you all very, very much. Thanks. Thank you. That was fun.